Welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole by Holly Madison. Viewer discretion is advised due to the contents in the book. Let's get back into it. There was a tiny walk-in closet that housed the few clothing items I owned, plus a black Playboy brand dress Adriana had left behind. Clearly, I had a clothing complex and was terrified that I would quickly run out of club-appropriate attire, so finding this little black dress was a huge relief. But that wasn't Adriana's only parting gift. She had also worked as a Hawaiian tropic girl, and we had met on a few occasions before she had moved in. While we were by no means close, she made it a point to find me before she left to wish me well. When I asked her why she was choosing to leave, she said, "I don't really feel like it's the right thing for me anymore. I know you're just moving in, but this place can be kind of rough." Adriana went on, offering me just a bit of warning. At the time, I wasn't quite sure what she meant, but I later learned that since she scored a centerfold almost immediately, the other girls were pretty hideous to her. My first day in bedroom 5 was quiet and uneventful. I remember it was a Thursday, which was the only night of the week there was nothing planned on Hef's agenda. When I asked Vicky if she wouldn't mind filling me in on the schedule, she acted as if it were some big annoyance. It's not like anyone handed you a pamphlet when you walked through the door, and I was terrified that my trial period would come to an abrupt end, so I wanted to make sure I was playing by all the rules. I chalked it up to a bad mood, but she didn't seem that excited to have me as a neighbor. After some coaxing, she finally offered me the rundown. Monday was manly night. Hef would have his guy friends over for a buffet dinner and a movie in the mansion screening room. Tuesday was family night. Hef's wife and 2 sons, who lived next door in a house Hef had purchased for them, would come over to all spend time together. Wednesday and Friday were club nights. We were all expected to be ready by 10 p.m. to be shuttled off with Hef to exclusive nightclubs all around Los Angeles. Thursday, like Monday and Tuesday, was an off night. While we had the evenings free to do as we pleased, the girlfriends were still required to be inside mansion walls by 9 p.m. Saturday was a buffet dinner and movie with Hef. Sunday was the Fun in the Sun pool party during the day and dinner and a movie at night. No one gave me a tour of the mansion when I arrived either. I knew my way around the grounds and most of the main house, but for weeks I kept discovering new places on the property. There was an underground secret passage that led from the main house to the gym, which was in the basement of the bathhouse. The mansion itself had a large basement full of employee lockers, storage closets, and laundry facilities. A panel in the wall of the living room could pop out to reveal a secret wine cellar, which was used as a speakeasy in the 1920s when the house was built. The master bedroom had an attic level where Hef kept a personal office of sorts. The adjacent bathroom truly looked like a time capsule or the land that time forgot. Gold shag rug covered the floor. A tray of toiletries from the 1970s sat untouched on the counter. The sink candles were carved to look like naked ladies. There was a 4-bedroom guest house on the grounds that hosted playmates and playmate candidates when they were brought in from out of town to shoot at Playboy Studio West in Santa Monica. I assumed the playmate guest house would be plush and clean like a hotel, with perhaps some playmate memorabilia strewn about to give it a sense of atmosphere. In reality, the guest house could have been described as Grandma's attic meets rent by the hour motel. In the 70s, Hef's girlfriend, Barbie Benton, had decorated the guest house as a charming early American cottage, but over the years the theme fell apart. What was left was dark, dingy, and depressing. There were many rules to living in the mansion, but most of them I had to figure out on my own. Like I said, no one handed me the Playboy Mansion for Dummies when I arrived. I also learned that the other girlfriends weren't so eager to help out the newbies, since it was in their best interest for us to stumble around in order to make all of them look better. First, there was a curfew. Being an older man, Hef stayed up reasonably late, usually tucking in around 11 p.m., but he required his girlfriends in by 9 p.m. Apparently, we couldn't get into too much mischief outside the walls before that hour. I had been present once when Vicky and Lisa had rolled in a half hour past curfew and got a major dressing down from Hef. No pun intended. He kicked his feet, mustered up some questionable crocodile tears. Was he really crying? I thought. And told them that if they wanted to stay out late, they could move out. Needless to say, his temper tantrum made a lasting impression on me. Next, the girlfriends were not allowed to fraternize with the staff unless absolutely necessary. This rule was not to be taken lightly. Hef would totally lose it if he caught one of us talking with anybody on the service team, and I eventually witnessed his irrational freak-out firsthand when future girlfriend Kendra Wilkinson spent too much time in the butler's pantry. According to mansion lore, there were 2 instances of girls having relations with mansion staffers. First, his ex-wife allegedly had an affair with one of the members of the security team and have found out. Second, one of the girlfriends had supposedly been caught sleeping with a butler. Now, I can't prove that either of these things happened, but it would explain why he was so overly sensitive about this particular rule. In the beginning, I'm sure the staffers thought I was terribly aloof and cold, but I was honestly just scared shitless. If I got kicked out, I had nowhere to go. I couldn't risk it. Each girlfriend was given a weekly clothing allowance of $1,000 for expenses. It was expected that we use this money to purchase clothing to wear for evening events, as well as beauty treatments, hair, nails, waxing, etc., that weren't covered by his in-house account at Jose Eber Salon in Beverly Hills. This was a welcome relief for me. It was clear that Hef preferred we dress in a particular way when we were out on the town with him, and I was desperate to revamp my wardrobe and fast. Hef made it abundantly clear that he preferred us in very over-the-top, sort of trashy outfits. Think bedazzled rhinestones, bustiers, and skirts so short that there was barely a point in wearing them. When he would compliment a girl on a particular dress, pair of shoes, or even the way she wore her hair, we all felt the need to replicate it for our next evening out. The last major requirement was that girlfriends attend the events designated on Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. While the girlfriends were always eager to party at the hottest Hollywood nightclubs on Wednesdays and Fridays, it was clear they used whatever excuse they could to get out of dinner and a movie nights. Oftentimes, it would be just April and me flanking Hef at the main dining table. We were still the 2 newest girls, so paying our dues was part of the program. The other girls stayed out until 9 p.m. on the nose, not wanting to miss even a single minute of freedom, which usually meant visiting the boyfriends that they kept on the side. How these side boyfriends felt about their girlfriends dating Hugh Hefner, I don't know. I imagine the girls weren't forthcoming with these men and probably denied that they even had sex with Hef. They denied it to everyone. Most of them referred to dating Hef as a big publicity stunt to help them launch their careers. Maybe some of the guys got a perverted little kick out of the fact that they were dating the same girl as Hugh Hefner. Who knows? Contrary to popular belief, most nights at the mansion were pretty boring. We ended up in one of the bedrooms gossiping or watching TV. One night, Lisa was hanging out in Vicky's room, and the doors to our connecting bathroom were open. When Tina came to visit, I went into Vicky's room to try and make an effort to be friendly with the girls. Tina was excitedly talking about her boyfriend And like the socially awkward person I was, I asked her, "Do you feel like he even takes you seriously when you live with Hef?" My intention wasn't to be mean. I actually wanted these girls to like me. I was genuinely curious. When I shared the news that I'd be moving into the mansion, I hadn't met the warmest response, so I wondered how everyone else's family, friends, and even boyfriends felt about it. Tina whipped her head in my direction and snapped a dismissive response at me. I grimaced and tried to apologize, but Tina wouldn't even look at me. She just rolled her eyes at Vicky. As you could have predicted, Tina's boyfriend didn't stick around long. In fact, none of the side boyfriends ever stayed longer than a few months at most. I don't think the men took them seriously. I always assumed most men were just using the girls to check some Playboy bunny fantasy off their bucket list. I only ever saw one side boyfriend stick around. Hank Basket. And the irony is that once she published this book, it was probably like 5 years later that Kendra and Hank started to go through their own issues in their marriage, and it was starting to crumble, but at least he was the longest side boyfriend to last. Following the rules wasn't difficult for me. I didn't know too many people in Los Angeles, and I quickly cut out the small group of friends I did have, either because I didn't want to be subjected to their judgment, or because they started to call asking for invites to the mansion and other favors I couldn't grant. Plus, I've always been a bit of a homebody and much preferred the delicious home-cooked meals the staff provided to dancing the night away at nightclubs, where I would usually get pretty drunk, purely out of sheer boredom. Most of the girls would have rather died than sit around the dining table with men 3 times their age. But I found Hef's friends funny and interesting and genuinely enjoyed listening to all of their stories. Eventually, I would convince myself that this was yet another component of the common ground Hef and I shared as a couple. Stockholm Syndrome, honey. Usually, the movie nights included a steady rotation of Hef's favorite classic films, and I adore old movies, something we were truly starting to bond over. Every Sunday night, Hef's office would arrange to have studios bring in movies that were still in theaters, and armed guards would enter the mansion with giant film cans to screen the newest Hollywood blockbuster for us. It was pretty cool, but it also was sort of bizarre because oftentimes celebrities or other important Hollywood power players would join us for the screenings and be relegated to spending roughly 2 hours squirming in uncomfortable metal folding chairs. That's right, they were not sitting in theater-style chairs at the Playboy Mansion. They were sitting in metal folding chairs. For being a super upscale home, it wasn't without its downscale touches. One of the most memorable was the tray of Johnson's baby oil, Vaseline, and Kleenex that was in every bathroom, in the grotto, and at the tennis courts and the pool bar. I don't know whether to be disgusted or amused by those trays. I think it's a little of both. Funny in the sense that they do provide them, but also disturbing in the sense that they felt that they needed to provide them. At first, my constant attendance at all of the events deemed boring by the other girls earned me a bit of good grace with them. They felt that I took some of the attention off their recurring absences while they busied about with their outside lives. Girls would find crafty ways to sneak out past curfew when they thought it wouldn't be noticed, like hiding in the trunk of someone's car as they drove off and onto the property. While evenings at the mansion were pretty regimented, during the day we were virtually free to do as we pleased. Hef was usually awake by 10 a.m. for breakfast, then meandered down the hall to his office wing, where he would work on the magazine, various book projects, and other business. He wouldn't emerge again until the evening. In the beginning, I spent most days with Brittany, a nice girl that I had met at the Sunday pool parties. We'd go to the gym, tan, lay by the pool, and cruise around LA searching for bargain clothes. The only other girl I remember spending time with was Lisa. Besides me, Lisa was the youngest girlfriend in the group, and at that time she lived in bedroom 2, the largest of the bedrooms, and was still celebrating the release of the issue in which she was the centerfold. She was a cute country girl who, according to the other girls, dated Kid Rock on the side, though I never saw any evidence of it. She had first auditioned for Playboy over a year prior to her Playmate pictorial finally being published. Somewhere along the way, she met Hef, became a girlfriend, and secured a centerfold after acquiring a new set of Hef-financed breast implants to lift the memories that he deemed too droopy for a Playmate. Like most of the other girlfriends, she was both manipulative and manipulated. Becoming a published centerfold didn't happen overnight. In fact, Playmate features were often shot 8 to 12 months before they actually hit newsstands. According to Vicky, Lisa had been a girlfriend for several months before losing patience. She threw a fit when we were out one night, asking when she was going to finally shoot her centerfold. Vicky once explained to me, rolling her eyes and exhaling cigarette smoke. She's the baby. She always gets what she wants. This is like a boy band, my friend Brittany added. Hef has to have a young one, an old one, a wild one. This brought a cackle out of Vicky, who rolled her eyes. He always plays the oldest one against the youngest one, Vicky explained, eager to share her expertise on the topic as we gossiped about the situation. Tina may be his main girlfriend, but she's older, so he likes to play on her insecurities by playing favorites with whoever the youngest one is. And Lisa isn't special. Before her, he used Buffy to play against Tina. I took note of this, but at the time, I didn't want to believe a man as old and accomplished as Hef could be that petty and immature. Vicky was starting to show her nasty side, so I wrote it off as jealousy on her part. Lisa was one of the friendlier girlfriends. In fact, when I walked by her room one morning, she called me in. Hey, want to go to Target with me later? I need to run some errands. Yeah, sure, let me know what time, I said, feeling lucky to be invited. I was hoping she could fill me in a little more on how things worked around the mansion, since Vicky and the others had given me the cold shoulder. Ugh, I need to get lipo, Lisa croaked, looking down at her belly and pinching her spare tire. She was adorable, but she had been told to lose weight by a Playboy photo editor. No, you don't, I said. You look fine. Thanks, she replied through a toothy grin. As I knelt down to pet one of her 3 dogs, she picked up the phone next to her bed, pressed 0 for the butler's pantry, and ordered a piece of chocolate cake and a glass of chocolate milk for breakfast. Was I in the twilight zone? Plastic surgery was so commonplace for these women that liposuction sprung to mind as the obvious weight loss cure before, say, taking chocolate cake out of your breakfast routine. Hang out here while I get ready, Lisa demanded while hopping into the bathroom. After she chatted on about herself for about 10 minutes, her cake was finally delivered. She thanked the butler, plopped the tray down on her bed, and started shoveling the cake in her mouth and asked, "So, how do you like it here so far?" Finally, someone I can talk to, I thought with relief. Now was a good time to ask a few questions and confess a few of my insecurities about this wild world I had just entered. I confided in Lisa that I wasn't too fond of April, that she really intimidated me. That's okay. The rest of us don't like her either, Lisa stated, wrinkling up her nose. Hef just likes her because she's wild. Oh, wow, thank God it's not just me, I sighed, feeling relieved. Maybe April wouldn't last that long, and then we could all really be like sorority sisters, all on the same team. Feeling more and more comfortable with Lisa, I thought I would ask her opinion about something that had started worrying me the past few days. Hef hasn't given me a bunny necklace yet, I admitted meekly. Do you think that's weird? Every playmate and every girlfriend was presented with a bunny pendant necklace from Hef. At the time, I, along with everyone else in LA's 30-mile zone, thought these necklaces were made with real diamonds. They had looked so glamorous, glittering on the chests of the chosen ones who flitted about the Playboy parties the hottest nightclubs, and the spendiest shopping districts in LA. In reality, the pendants were cubic zirconia, and if you could track down the downtown LA jeweler who made them, anyone could purchase one for just about $100. My interest in acquiring a necklace had nothing to do with its value, however. Sure, I coveted one, but my worry stemmed from what it symbolized. Hef's words echoed in my mind. You can stay for a while, and we'll see how it works out. Maybe I wasn't making the cut. That had to be why he hadn't graced me with a necklace yet. In the few weeks I had been there, he had presented one to Cheris Boyle, an upcoming centerfold whom he had met after me. Somehow, I had been skipped over. "Oh, he hasn't?" Lisa asked, feigning amazement. "Oh, yeah, I don't know why that is," she purred as she put down her fork and sauntered back into the bathroom. I felt a knot in my stomach. That was definitely not the reaction I had hoped for. Lisa's sisterly vibe had me hoping she would reassure me that this was normal, or perhaps even offer to ask for me. After all, she seemed so comfortable around Hef and was certainly good at getting whatever she wanted. As Lisa readied herself for the day and led me down to her car, my mind was in turmoil. Was my time here almost over? I had barely been at the mansion 2 weeks, and already I didn't seem to be making the cut. What would I do now? As it turns out, I wasn't the only one with these kinds of anxieties. As we wound our way through LA traffic down to Target in Culver City, Lisa kept babbling about herself. I found her stream of consciousness narrative fascinating, as her anxieties mirrored mine. The only difference was that she had been here longer and had a centerfold under her belt. "See this?" she bragged, holding up her checkbook for me to see the balance, which hovered just above $25,000. "It's the money I earned doing my Playmate pictorial," she exclaimed proudly. "I haven't touched a penny. You know the other girls aren't even thinking. They have Hef leasing them cars they could never afford, and they spend money like there's no tomorrow." She looked pleased with herself. "Everyone made fun of me for getting this car," she said, patting the steering wheel of her brand new Toyota RAV4. "But I wanted something I can afford after I move out. I don't need a Porsche." Smart, I thought. In fact, it was the first sensible thing I had heard out of any of the girlfriends' mouths so far. As we roamed through Target, she filled her shopping cart with everything from a nose hair trimmer to dog toys. "I always spend so much at Target," she sighed. "You always walk out of here with more than you need." I smiled and nodded my head in agreement. Before another pause could pass, Lisa started babbling again. "You know, I don't know if I could ever go back home," Lisa continued. "One of my guy friends from home, the other day, he got real rude with me on the phone and said the only reason I got centerfold was because I fucked Hef." I wasn't 100% sure if she was even talking to me anymore, or just thinking out loud. She shrugged her shoulders and tried to offer a half-hearted smirk, but I could tell the comment bothered her deeply. I could certainly relate. Like me, I think she got into this situation without quite realizing what a public decision it was. "It's not true. You're gorgeous," I offered, trying to cheer her up. "You could have become a centerfold anyway." And it was true. She was curvy, cute, and baby-faced, resembling a petite version of Anna Nicole Smith. "Thanks," she sighed, offering a weak smile. "But I can't go back home. I mean, what am I supposed to do? I'm not above working a real job, but if I'm working at a counter somewhere, everyone I know is going to come up and be like, 'Oh, Lisa, look where you are now after posing naked.' It's embarrassing." I was just as anxious as Lisa was about the life that waited for me outside the mansion gates. So many things seemed to be grounds for dismissal that I was petrified to step out of line. While becoming an actress was still a passion of mine, it was always best to keep my auditions quiet. After Brandy Roderick had left Hef for Baywatch, Hawaii, he kept a much closer eye on any acting work the girlfriends tried to pursue. I secretly hoped to land a role big enough that it would allow me to leave the mansion after a few months, but those kind of dream jobs are few and far between. Eventually, I would receive offers for smaller parts in music videos and low-budget films, but the hours often went past our curfew, and the jobs rarely paid much, so they hardly seemed worth it. If anything, they would only land me in hot water with my boyfriend, who, as the weeks passed into months, appeared more and more controlling. It seemed my acting dreams were stalled for the time being. I felt caught between a rock and a hard place. I thought having a rent-free roof over my head would make chasing my dreams so much easier, but that wasn't turning out to be the case. I had managed to hold on to my day shifts at Hooters for a few months. I guess Hef didn't feel particularly threatened by a lowly waitressing job, and I was able to slowly start paying off the debt I had amassed in college. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As they do every year, Hooters chooses a waitress from each region to be featured in the Hooters magazine and participate in their national bikini contest. One day, the general manager called me into her office and told me that Hooters wanted me to represent Santa Monica. I was very flattered. There were so many beautiful girls that had worked at the restaurant, and they had chosen me. My friend Roxy had been chosen the year before and had told me how much fun it was and how many people she had met. I was still hoping to break into the entertainment world and was eager to take any opportunity, even if it was just a pageant title. No, Hef said when I told him about the offer and asked permission to leave for 2 days. I expected him to maybe pout a bit, but I wasn't really anticipating a flat-out no. Hef never seemed bothered by my job, and since he wasn't eager to feature me in Playboy, I couldn't imagine why he would care about me being in another magazine, especially since there was never anything racier than a bikini photo in the Hooters magazine. "You can't do it!" he shouted, pounding his fist on his desk. His voice had become irrationally loud. "Why?" I asked. I had already agreed to do it, and was totally perplexed by the strange tantrum he was throwing. "Because you working there makes me jealous," he yelled, his hands flying in the air, doing his best to well up some more fake tears. In the months I worked at Hooters, Hef never once expressed feeling threatened by my being there. But now I was getting an offer to do something fun, something that made me feel special. He all of a sudden had an issue with it. The timing was a little too convenient. Hef was waiting for me to argue or to cry, but I just stood silently in front of his desk. I could see the anxiety creep across his face. He didn't know how to read my non-reaction, so he took it a step further. "I don't want you working there while you're living in this house," he shouted, hoping this would evoke some response. He thrived on this kind of drama. He was half hoping for me to surrender and half hoping for a fight. Without saying a word, and as stoically as possible, I turned around and saw myself out of his office. Inside, I was crushed, but I was trying to keep my dignity. The next day, with a heavy heart, I called the general manager and let her know that not only could I not attend the pageant, I was quitting my job as well. Honestly, I can't even remember what I said. It was a crushing defeat, and it felt like I was saying goodbye to a part of me. In hindsight, that incident should have been a blaring indicator of what my life was going to be like behind those gates. But I still had high hope. I felt like my last shroud of independence was gone, but at that point, I thought I'd seen the worst of it. It wasn't an ideal world, but I could make it work. I could find some happiness here while I figured out my next move, I reasoned with myself. After all, it would only be a few months, maybe a year at most. Chapter 4. Now here, you see it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. If you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that. And that is from Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass. Almost said looking through the glass, and that's wrong. "You girls are basically Hef's traveling harem, right?" asked the eager New York Magazine reporter, sticking a small silver voice recorder in my face. Only a few weeks after I had moved into the mansion, Hef whisked us away on a trip to New York City for his Comedy Central's Friars Club roast. I'd never been to New York before. I'd actually never been off the West Coast before. It seemed so surreal and slightly absurd that a reporter would be questioning me about my life with Hugh Hefner. I began through a short laugh. I wasn't quite sure how to respond to this older, bespectacled journalist with the practical brown bob. Despite what the nature of the event may suggest, I couldn't be certain if she was joking or not. This particular roast had special meaning to New Yorkers. In the wake of the September 11th tragedy, a dark cloud hovered over New York, and the entire country for that matter. Comedy Central reasoned that giving people an hour of time to laugh again might help kickstart the healing process, and they decided to move forward with Hef's scheduled roast. The day before the event, Hef, his girlfriends, and his staff, including his longtime assistant, Mary O'Connor, his personal photographer, and a team of security, boarded a chartered private jet at Van Nuys Airport and headed to New York. The network hosted us at the New York Hilton Midtown. Hef and Tina occupied the hotel's regal presidential suite, while the rest of us were given gorgeous rooms with breathtaking views of the city. Whose life was I living? Private jets, luxury hotels. Last month, I was barely making rent on a shitty shared apartment. There were many perks to being one of Hugh Hefner's girlfriends, including the VIP treatment everywhere we went. I'll be honest, being treated like royalty wasn't necessarily a hard routine to fall into. Sure, it was mainly directed at Hef, and we were considered ornamental, but reaping the benefits of his celebrity certainly had its moment. Prior to the festivities, Hef was expected to walk the red carpet with his 7 girlfriends for brief press interviews and to pose for photographers. The attire was black tie, so each girlfriend packed her most glamorous cocktail dress or pantsuit. With my clothing allowance, I was able to buy a retro-style Betsy Johnson black and white ball gown. I loved it, but I felt a little out of place after I realized how conservative my poofy below-the-knee dress looked next to the other girls' tighter and more revealing ensemble. When we arrived in our stretch limo to the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, my heart fell into my stomach. I'd never been to an event like this in my life, let alone on the arm of the guest of honor. As we piled on each side of Hef for photographs outside the ballroom, I began shadowing the other girlfriends, terrified to make any kind of noticeable mistakes. I mimicked the girls who appeared to be veterans at this point. Like the other 6, I plastered on my brightest smile and stood patiently behind Hef as he conducted one interview after the other. I had to watch my step, though. Simply falling into place in line didn't work for the other girls. One girlfriend, Carolyn, shamelessly shoved me out of the way so she could stand closer to Hef. Because we were in front of the press, all of a sudden, being as close as possible to Hef was really important to all of the girls who normally couldn't be farther away. When the New York Magazine reporter shoved her device under my nose, I was taken off guard. I didn't want to seem unfriendly or rude, so I answered her questions as politely as possible and excused myself to follow the rest of the girlfriends into the ballroom. "What did the reporter ask you?" Vicky hissed as I sat down at the large banquet table closest to the stage. "She asked me if we were a harem that travels with Hef." I let out a small laugh. To me, it was just a silly-sounding question. "What did you say?" Vicky asked me, her eyes like slits. I just sort of laughed and said, "Well, I guess so." I told her, a smile still stuck on my face, completely unaware that I might have done something wrong. I didn't take the question literally. When she said harem, I thought she meant an ornamental group of women, not sex slaves. I had been around only a few weeks. How was I supposed to know how to answer a question like that? I'd never spoken to a reporter in my life. "No!" Vicky spat at me, exasperated. "Don't ever say that we sleep with him. We always tell people that only Tina does." I could see that I rattled her pretty hard. As Hef took his throne on stage, Vicky spent the rest of the evening ignoring me and whispering to the other girlfriends in between venomous glances. She'd clearly misled me in the beginning. I guess I shouldn't have been so shocked that she was trying to mislead others too. But exactly who did she think she was fooling? The irony wasn't at all lost on me that the entirety of the evening consisted of sex jokes, implying that Hef was intimate with each of the 7 blondes sitting at his feet. I've read just about every issue of Playboy since I was 15 years old, began the host, Jimmy Kimmel. And not once did I see a playmate say that one of her turn-ons was fucking a 75-year-old man. Inside the mansion, life wasn't at all like what I dreamed it would be. Instead of a nightly slumber party with 6 of your best friends, I had entered the lion's den. It gave a whole new meaning to the phrase, keep your enemies close, and made a sorority house look like Bible study. By the time I had arrived, fewer and fewer opportunities were being offered to girlfriends to appear in the magazine, which meant the pack was getting restless. Over the years, Hef had become wiser to the girls' true motivations. After achieving playmate status, they no longer found it necessary to stay at the mansion or with Hef. The truly gilded age of Playboy had long since passed, and our nightly rituals felt more Golden Girls than Playboy Club. Girls stuck around on the off chance that they'd one day become a playmate, or until a better option came along, and Hef knew it. He decided he wasn't going to make any more of his girlfriend's playmates, but he never told that to anyone. He dangled the possibility of playmatehood in order to keep the girls interested. The more aggressive girlfriends would take whatever measures necessary to secure a centerfold, even ruthlessly throwing another girl under the bus, if that meant she would gain favor with him. As always, Vicky was eager to bring as many girls up into the bedroom as possible. I could guess her reasoning. The more options Hef had, the less likely she'd be called to duty. It seemed to me that she made it her mission to lure every new playmate up to the bedroom to pay their dues. In those first few years, I would say the majority of the playmates eventually selected had found their way into Hef's bedroom. I guess Vicky figured that if she had to sleep with Hef, they all should have to sleep with him too. I was too naive to realize it at the time, but Hef was the catalyst for all the drama I was to experience at the mansion. He recognized that some of the girls were warming up to me and began using my perfect attendance as one of his many tools to manipulate and control his wild pack. Pitting the girlfriends against one another created an aggressive, competitive atmosphere where he alone benefited. During one of my first nights at the mansion, the girlfriends had banded together on a Friday evening and told Hef they didn't feel like going out that night. I was the newest member of the crew, so I just sat there, observing the confrontation. "So what do I say to my party posse?" he said, throwing up his hands and wearing the most disappointed look ever on his face. "Sorry, Hef," Lisa said. "We'll go out next week." Needless to say, Hef decided then and there that the girlfriend's days of being chummy were over. After all, he couldn't be outnumbered, could he? It was in his best interest to have us swallowing in our own insecurities and pawing for his acceptance. Girlfriends that didn't get along gave him the feeling of being fought over, and being fought over made him feel desired, something he was desperate to feel in his old age. A stable environment among the girlfriends wasn't much fun for him, so he began using me as a means to reprimand them. "Why can't you be a good girl like Holly?" Hef bemoaned to a girlfriend who wanted a curfew extension, knowing full well that his small remark would pin a bullseye on my back for weeks. They began resenting me for the very reason they initially accepted me. A few weeks into my residency, it was obvious that Vicky was regretting the role she played in recruiting me into the fold. Initially, Vicky must have thought that she could use what little relationship I had with Adriana to her advantage. Hef was totally smitten with Adriana, who looked like a perfect, fresh-faced beach bunny. So Vicky, who was as mean as a snake, must have thought that I would have some useful information she could use to help take her competition down. Since Adriana had moved out of the mansion, it was clear to me that my presence was no longer of use to Vicky. I think she continued to deal with me because she considered me average looking compared to the rest of the girlfriends. They all tried the best they could to recreate the ideal of Pamela Anderson. I, on the other hand, wasn't interested in transforming myself into a spearmint rhino version of the Baywatch beauty. I wanted to look good enough to be a playmate, but still hold on to some of what made me unique, and frankly, avoid looking like a blow-up doll. But as soon as Hef started using me as a behavioral example, Vicky no longer wanted anything to do with me. Today, trying to recall how particularly hideously some of the girlfriends treated me is a bit difficult. I liken it to being the dorky girl in the lunchroom who eats her sandwich quietly with her nose buried deep in a book, praying she didn't attract the unwanted attention of the popular kids. That's sort of how I felt, but unlike that little girl at school, I couldn't look forward to weekends or nights free from these mean girls. I lived with them. Prior to moving into the mansion, I'd been a fairly confident person, but it didn't take long for my self-worth to start to crumble. After being identified by the other girlfriends as persona non grata, I became the victim of their ruthless, mean girling. During dinners or movie screenings, it wasn't out of the ordinary for me to overhear their loud whispers criticizing my appearance. My hair, my face, my clothes. According to their ruthless taunting, I was the hit girl from Nowheresville, USA. They found my optimistic attitude corny and my confidence threatening. So, they did whatever they could to tear me down. Sadly, I have to say it worked. Any playmates or playmate candidates they befriended would join in mocking me as well. Hef's hearing was already pretty deteriorated, so, like him, I acted as if I did not hear their harsh remarks. My silence only further incited them, and their attacks became more vicious. She did not give them the satisfaction of getting a rise out of her, and you can tell that it bothered them, because why else become more vicious? That's my conclusions. Once I started acquiring a decent wardrobe, my clothing began mysteriously disappearing. When I would send things downstairs to be laundered, they would never make their way back. As a gift, each girlfriend was given a gorgeous embroidered burgundy silk robe. We all sent ours to be cleaned before an upcoming event, but only mine was missing. I reverted to writing my name on the inside of each label like a third grader going away to camp, but even that wasn't really any kind of insurance policy. And the reason she felt like a third grader is because all of them were acting real childish and petty towards her, and she had to match that energy and give them what they were giving her. I quickly learned that complaining about the girls' antics serves zero purpose. You know the phrase, don't pew-pew the messenger? Well, Hef loved to pew-pew the messenger. He would make sure to twist any compliment around into my doing, and I'd ended up apologizing to him. He cultivated an environment where we were perpetually indebted to him. My priority became remaining in his good graces. Regardless, whenever Hef was around, I stayed close to his heels. Even though his presence didn't necessarily protect me from their bullying, I felt somehow safer. The mean girls couldn't be as obvious for fear that he might turn his wrath on them. 2 months into my mansion residency, I finally got to attend my first Playboy party as a girlfriend. With my clothing allowance, I was able to go to Trashy Lingerie, a popular boutique, to pick out my costume. Despite its name, it was way out of my price range before. I chose a frilly Alice in Wonderland costume that came with a purse shaped like a slice of cake with "Eat Me" written cheekily on it in white puffy paint. The outfit was supposed to be sexy, but once again, I had chosen something quite conservative compared to the body-hugging ensembles the other girlfriends chose. When it came to public events and appearances, there was a protocol for the girlfriends to follow. Each of us was expected to meet Hef in his room so we could all make our grand entrance into the party together. It wasn't as exclusive as it might sound, as many of the girlfriends brought their female friends who joined us for our entrance. Everyone was dressed in something skin tight. A spandex-clad race car driver, a spandex-clad taxi driver, and a few spandex-clad cops. By comparison, I felt like a giant, frilly cream puff. When the time came to walk downstairs, we all trailed down the grand staircase slowly, with Hef's house camera crew filming every moment for posterity. Hef trailed behind us wearing the black and white striped prisoner of love jailbird costume he wore every year. When we arrived at the foot of the stairs, we were instructed to line up in 2 rows so Hef's house photographer could take our group portrait. After the short photo session was finished, I followed the group out into the tinted backyard and towards Hef's table next to the dance floor. On our way out, a naked woman clad only in body paint shoved a tray in front of me. "Jello shot?" she asked. "Don't mind if I do," I said with a smile, grabbing a green one off of her tray. "The red ones are the best," Vicky snapped at me with a cold smile as soon as I reached Hef's table with my green shot in hand. She was right. The red ones did taste the best. Never having had a Jello shot before, I was amazed at how delicious they were and clueless at how potent they were. Needless to say, I got wasted. Fast. The girlfriends pretty much ignored my existence the whole night, so luckily I spotted some of my old Hooters friends and motioned for them to come over and talk to me. The novelty of my position as Hef's newest girlfriend hadn't worn off yet, so everyone had plenty of questions, the less polite of which I dodged with non-answer. As girlfriends, the protocol was that we stay at Hef's table all night. We could get up and dance as long as we stayed on the dance floor in front of the table. The only time we were allowed to leave was to go to the bathroom. There were times when some of the girls managed to get away for short periods of time due to the fact that Hef was so distracted by all the partygoers clamoring for his attention. Star fucking was a priority for most of the girls, so they tried to sneak away and meet as many famous men as possible. One of the biggest running jokes among the girls was when a girlfriend who owned a pet capuchin monkey she liked to tote around for attention took Jennifer Lopez's ex-husband Chris Judd up to her room to show him her monkey. When Hef was ready to leave the party, usually around 1 a.m., we had to go upstairs with him. Of course, there were always girlfriends who snuck back down to the parties after Hef was asleep to chase men or hobnob with celebrities, but they were always very discreet about it. After all, Hef's videographers wandered the parties until the wee hours, capturing all the goings on, and none of the girls wanted to get caught on tape. By the next afternoon, Hef's video department would have a tape sitting outside Hef's door with a highlight reel from last night's party, copies of which would be sent to local news stations. So much for what happens at the mansion stays at the mansion. That year, Playboy would collaborate with Girls Gone Wild to release a DVD titled Playboy Mansion Parties Uncensored. I just recently watched the whole documentary about Girls Gone Wild and Joe Francis, and I have been meaning to share my opinions on that. So if anybody is interested in that, let me know. But I may release it no matter what because I had a lot of thoughts. The DVD, a compilation of all kinds of random party footage, including nudity and celebrity sightings, flew off the shelves. The effect that particular business venture had on the brand was questionable, however. The overeagerness of Playboy to exploit what went on at the mansion parties dirtied the cachet of these events that were once considered exclusive and glamorous. No longer feeling like their privacy was being respected, fewer and fewer A-list celebrities wanted to attend anymore. Understandably so. The night ended with me passed out on my bedroom floor with a cheeseburger in my lap. It had become clear to me that being part of Hugh Hefner's party posse wasn't as glamorous as it seemed. This was a far cry from what I pictured life here would be like when I first laid eyes on the gorgeous Bentley twins a year and a half earlier at the Midsummer Night's Dream Party. The situation was also much lonelier than I could have ever imagined. Not to mention, more stressful. The day-to-day stress of mansion life had taken such a toll on me that I could feel myself mentally regressing. My memory started to dull, and things I used to know with certainty started to fade from my mind. I've always considered myself an intelligent girl, but I could feel myself getting dumber and began second-guessing everything. That might sound insane, but I suppose you are the company you keep. And let's just say the other 6 girlfriends weren't necessarily winning any spelling bees. I was so constantly on edge that I eventually developed a stammer when speaking, so I tried as best I could to stay quiet and not risk the embarrassment of tripping over sentences. To Hef, my shrinking violet personality was a sign of submission that he used to manipulate the other women. It helped my rise through the girlfriend ranks to become among Hef's favorites. Over time, I convinced myself that I did actually care for this man, that I wanted to be in a relationship with him despite the fact that I didn't really know him. Of course, living with someone, you learn things about their personalities, their tics and their annoyances, but Hef and I never really talked. Not about things that mattered. There was no deep conversation or romance between us. As far as his girlfriends were concerned, we were better seen and not heard. His friends were there for his intellectual stimulation. My job was to show up and look pretty. Even our daily dialogue was superficial. If ever I tried to speak to him about books, politics, or world events, he would scoff at whatever I said. It didn't matter if my remark was educated or even correct, because if I said it, it must be wrong. During movie nights, he would lean over to me to explain plot lines and time periods in the most condescending of ways. Oftentimes, I would have to bite my tongue. It was all I could do to keep from screaming, "I know!" Clearly, he was used to, or preferred, a woman with no more than a grade-level education. Grade school leveled education. But I was young and blinded by his fame and accomplishments. What wasn't to love about Hef, I told myself. Because of his generosity, I was living on this gorgeous estate, attending swanky Hollywood parties, and had money to spend on clothes, shoes, hair, and makeup. So I reasoned with myself that no two people are exactly the same. Of course, we won't see eye to eye on everything, I thought. With that in mind, I began noticing only his good qualities. He was smart, kind to his friends, appreciated the arts, and had a sense of humor. I chose to see my world through rose-colored glasses and ignored all of his bad qualities, no matter how over the top they were. Like Beauty locked up in Beast Castle, I developed my own brand of Stockholm Syndrome, identifying with my captor. I felt like there was no one I could turn to besides Hef. I thought I could trust him. Somehow Hef became the good guy in my eyes. Slowly I started to isolate myself from the other girls, for good reason, and from everyone outside the gates, for other reasons. I developed a reputation as an ice queen since I was so quiet and I kept to myself. On the outside, Hef appeared to be the perfect gentleman, an act that paired nicely with my delusions. He always described himself as a hopeless romantic and acted as if his womanizing was some long search for the perfect woman that didn't exist. Whether this image was calculated to make him more palatable to the public, more endearing to potential conquests, or both, I don't know. All I know is that it worked on me like a charm. I felt strangely protective of him. The other girlfriends used him, mocked him, and even cheated on him with the boyfriends they kept outside the mansion. They made him look foolish, and I resented them for it, all the while overlooking the fact that we were mice trapped inside the glamorous maze he created. It was survival of the fittest, and we all were just trying to come out alive. I convinced myself that I could look past his age and appearance. Perhaps we're right for each other, I routinely told myself. After all, I had never fit in anywhere else before, and certainly hadn't had any luck at love. Maybe guys my own age just weren't for me, I thought. Maybe I was always meant to one day find Hef. And just like that, I was in love. It didn't seem to matter that I couldn't recall how or why. Simply put, it was just a decision I made. By the time Christmas rolled around, I had already been at the mansion for 4 months. Nobody told me beforehand what the expectations were for us girlfriends during the holidays, so I was surprised to find out that Christmases were always spent with Hef. Girlfriends were given off days before or after the holiday to visit family and friends, but there were no exceptions for the actual day itself. That was the one house rule that no one seemed to mind, because Christmas was when Hef was most generous with his girlfriends. Hef really is a big kid at heart, and he loves the magic of Christmas morning. The mansion was always decorated from top to bottom. A formal Christmas dinner was held every year, and he spared no expense under the Christmas tree. Each girlfriend was given $500 to spend on gifts for each girl living at the mansion at that time, and $500 for ourselves. The idea was 7 sets of matching gifts. With 6 other girls in residence, that was $3,500 to spend. I selected elegant Louis Vuitton leather evening purses for each of us. They would be perfect for our nights out. My understated choice wasn't gaudy enough for Tina, however. She returned my gift in exchange for a Louis Vuitton bucket purse with the brand's logo emblazoned all over it. Carolyn got us Gucci purses. April chose fur jackets. I ended up donating mine to Goodwill. Real fur has never been my thing. Candace, who stepped into the spot Adriana had left vacant, picked out large Gucci travel totes, and Vicky selected Gucci shoes. And I'm running out of time, but I will be back with more parts again very soon.